The cold steel pressed against her wrists. The dry click of handcuffs echoed across the eerily quiet afternoon street. Just a few minutes ago, she had been simply a woman stopped on the side of the road in a small town. A minor parking violation, an unclear sign. And now, she was facing the barrel of a red-faced policeman's gun, roaring insults and demanding an unreasonable fine on the spot. $500 cash. For a mistake she was certain she had not made on purpose. When she calmly questioned him, demanding transparency and following proper procedures, the situation escalated out of control. Her insistence, her refusal to silently accept injustice, seemed to have angered the power beast in the officer. He not only insulted her, he drew his weapon. Now, handcuffed and shoved into the back seat of a patrol car like a dangerous criminal, her dignity was crushed. Many people might have been frightened and subdued, but in this woman's eyes, despite the brief flash of panic, there was an unusual calmness, an unwavering determination that surprised even the police officer and made him even angrier. Who is this mysterious woman? Why did she dare to confront a police officer who was abusing his power? Is this stupid stubbornness, or is there something behind that normal appearance that the police officer could not have expected? Where will this tense confrontation lead? The story does not end here. The fateful call from the new police station is the real beginning of a storm that is about to hit this small town. Let's listen to the whole story to discover the unbelievable truth behind this seemingly normal arrest. The late August afternoon sun gilded the main road through Harmony Creek, a small town nestled somewhere in the rolling hills of the American Midwest. The air was thick and muggy, with the promise of an oncoming storm. Evelyn Reed squinted through the windshield of her familiar dark blue sedan. At 51, with her wavy black hair tied back in a bun, her eyes sharp and watchful, and her upright, steady posture, she had the military bearing ingrained in her after nearly 3 decades of service. She was on a rare vacation, a brief break from a stressful workday. Harmony Creek was not a glamorous tourist destination, but it had personal significance. Her beloved ailing Aunt Clara still lived here, in the small house at the end of Maple Street where Evelyn had spent her childhood summers. She wanted to visit her, bring her a gift, and spend a few quiet days before returning to the grind of work. The main street of the town seemed much the same as she remembered it. A few shabby storefronts, a grocery store, a small diner. She slowed down, looking for a parking spot to stop at a nearby flower shop to buy a bouquet of hydrangeas for Aunt Clara. The yellow paint marking the no parking zone on the side of the road had faded considerably over the years, parts of it almost gone. A sign that said, "No parking 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays," was half obscured by a tree branch. The clock on the dashboard read 3:55 p.m. Evelyn glanced around, saw no other vehicles, and the area seemed empty. Maybe she could still make it, she thought. Just a quick pop in for some flowers. She steered carefully, parking the car close to the curb in what she thought was a legal space, just in front of the faded line and the partially obscured sign. She turned off the engine, checked her purse, and stepped out of the car, taking in a breath of the thick town air. Just as she closed the door, a short, shrill siren sounded from behind her. A Harmony Creek Police Department patrol car pulled up behind her, its roof lights flashing haunting red and blue circles. The door swung open, and a police officer stepped out. He was a medium-sized man, in his mid-30s or early 40s, with a beer belly protruding from his uniform, his face red and scowling. The name tag on his chest read, "Officer Miller." Miller strode toward Evelyn, his hand on the holster at his side, a gesture of authority. His eyes scanned Evelyn from head to toe, then stopped at her relatively new sedan with an unfriendly scrutiny. Without a word of greeting, Miller spoke curtly, pointing straight at the front of Evelyn's car. "Didn't you see that sign? Or is there something wrong with your eyes?" His tone was condescending and annoyed. Evelyn frowned slightly at the rudeness, but kept her voice calm. She had dealt with more stressful situations than this. "Hello, officer. I see the sign, but it seems to be obscured by branches and the markings are faded. Besides, I think it's still a few minutes until 4. Miller sneered, a laugh that was not at all cheerful. "There is no a few more minutes here. You get a ticket for parking illegally. Where are the papers?" Evelyn didn't argue further. She turned and opened the car door, grabbed her wallet, and pulled out her driver's license and registration, handing them to Miller cooperatively. She was sure she hadn't done anything terribly wrong, just a minor misunderstanding about the parking area. Miller took the papers, glancing at them as if they were a formality, his eyes not hiding his prejudice as he looked at Evelyn's name and photo on the license. A black woman with the title Doctor. He didn't seem to bother reading it carefully, his attention already turning to how to make things difficult. "Illegal parking," Miller announced firmly, handing the papers back to Evelyn nonchalantly. "The fine is $500. Pay it now." $500? Evelyn couldn't help but be surprised. A parking fine, even if it was intentional, couldn't be that absurd in a small town. $500? "Officer, I'm sure there's been a mistake. That's way above the normal parking fine. Besides," she paused, looking Miller straight in the eye, "isn't it standard procedure to issue a ticket, not collect the fine on the spot?" Evelyn's calm and reasoned manner seemed to hit a nerve with Miller. His face flushed even more, his jaw tightened. Perhaps he was used to people, especially those he considered lowly, either obeying orders or showing fear. Having a black woman question his procedures made him feel like his authority was being challenged. "Are you trying to tell me how to do things?" Miller growled, stepping a little closer to Evelyn, deliberately invading her personal space. "Here in Harmony Creek, you have to listen to what I say. You people are always thinking you know it all and making excuses." The words "people like you" were like an invisible slap. Evelyn felt a familiar surge of anger rise in her chest, but experience and military discipline helped her contain it. She took a deep breath. "Officer, I'm not trying to lecture anyone. I just want to clarify the procedure and the appropriate penalty. I'm willing to accept a ticket if I'm in violation and will deal with it through the courts or other due process." "Procedure? Procedure is you pay the fine right now. $500 cash," Miller almost shouted, spit flying. "If you don't have cash, follow me to the station." "I will not be paying cash here," Evelyn replied, her voice even but her eyes sharp. "That is not how the law works. Please write me up." Evelyn's determination was the final spark that lit Miller's powder keg. His patience was gone. "Stubborn!" he roared, slamming his hand down on the roof of Evelyn's car with a dry bang. And then, in a sudden and dangerous escalation, Miller pulled his Glock pistol from its holster. He didn't point it at Evelyn, but held it at the ready, the barrel pointed down but still threatening enough to kill. "You want to fight this hard? Put your hands behind your head, now!" A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. A soldier's first instinct was to assess the threat. Miller was clearly out of control, acting irrationally and dangerously. Physical confrontation was suicidal. She glanced around, seeing that a few pedestrians on the opposite sidewalk had stopped, looking over with curiosity and fear, but no one was making any move to intervene. For a brief moment, she felt the loneliness and helplessness that so many other people of color felt when faced with such abuses. "Stay calm, Evelyn. Don't give him any more reasons," she told herself. Slowly, she raised her hands to shoulder level, then slowly brought them behind her head. Her gaze remained fixed on Miller, unwavering, but filled with suppressed anger. "That's better," Miller smirked, feeling good about subduing the stubborn one. He holstered his gun and pulled out a pair of shiny metal handcuffs. "Face the car." Evelyn reluctantly complied. The cold metal clanged as Miller locked her wrists behind her back. The cuffs dug into her flesh, not physically painful, but utterly humiliating. She was handcuffed like a criminal on the streets of a small town for a trivial parking violation. Miller read her Miranda rights in a sarcastic tone, then shoved Evelyn in the back, forcing her toward the patrol car. "Get in! You're under arrest for resisting an officer and causing a disturbance." She was shoved into the hard back seat of the police car. The door slammed shut, trapping her in a cramped space that smelled of old sweat and cheap disinfectant. The car honked and sped away, leaving her dark blue sedan by the side of the road, beneath a covered sign and faded paint. The short drive to the Harmony Creek police station was a heavy silence. Miller said nothing more, occasionally glancing triumphantly at Evelyn in the rearview mirror. Evelyn sat upright, uncomfortable with her hands cuffed behind her back. She scanned the car window, memorizing street names and buildings, trying to pinpoint the exact location of the police station. Her mind raced, analyzing the situation and considering her next steps. The anger was still there, but it had been transformed into a steely resolve. She knew she had to act wisely. The Harmony Creek police station was a run-down, one-story brick building tucked away on a side street. Miller practically dragged Evelyn out of the car and pushed her inside. The small lobby contained only a tall, worn oak reception desk, behind which stood a tired, uninterested duty sergeant. A few other cops sat around the room, some reading newspapers, some scrolling through their phones, hardly noticing Evelyn's presence. "A protest, Sarge," Miller said loudly, his voice still full of spite, nudging Evelyn toward the counter. "She won't pay, and she's arguing." The duty sergeant, a middle-aged man with gray hair and sunken eyes, looked up at Evelyn and then down at his notebook. "Okay, Miller. Take her to interview room 2. He spoke in a monotone voice, without any sign of surprise or concern. It seemed that Miller brought a black man into the station for no apparent reason. Evelyn was taken into a small room, the pale green paint peeling in places. There was only an old metal table and 2 plastic chairs. Miller pushed her into one of the chairs, her hands still cuffed behind her back. "Sit still," he ordered before turning to leave. "I request permission to make a phone call," Evelyn said, her voice clear and firm. Miller stopped, turning to look at her with annoyance. "Call who? Lawyer? Call home and cry?" "I have the right to make a phone call," Evelyn repeated, not answering his question. "It is my right." Miller was about to refuse, but the sergeant on duty was already in the doorway. "All right, Miller. Give her the handcuffs and let her make the call. Use the phone on the table. Keep an eye on her," the sergeant said, probably wanting to get it over with. He threw Evelyn a dismissive look and turned away. Miller pushed Evelyn's handcuffs forward with a huff and pointed to the old landline phone on the table. 5 minutes. He stood with his arms crossed against the wall, eyes fixed on Evelyn, certain she would call some local lawyer. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to keep her fingers from shaking as she picked up the receiver with her handcuffed hands. She leaned forward to hold the receiver to her ear. With a concentrated effort, she began dialing a long, complicated number, a coded, direct line for senior officers in case of emergency, connecting them directly to a special unit at the Pentagon. Miller smirked, the long dial tone sounding funny to him, probably calling some cousin in another state. The phone connected almost immediately. There was no ringing tone, just a deep professional voice on the other end. "Command Center, please speak." Evelyn kept her voice calm and clear, as if she were reporting to a staff meeting. "This is Colonel Evelyn Reed, service number 7-4-9-Alpha-Charlie-6-0. I am being held without warrant at the Harmony Creek Police Department, approximate address at the corner of Elm and Main. Situation: arrested for alleged illegal parking and refusal to pay an illegal cash fine on the spot. Requesting immediate status verification and assistance under senior personnel protection procedures." She spoke without explanation. The terms she used, military identification number, senior personnel protection procedure, were keywords enough to trigger a series of actions on the other end of the line. The professional voice responded immediately, without a hint of surprise. Yes, Colonel Reed. Information and location noted. Verifying and mobilizing support. Please hold the line if possible or ensure your own safety. Someone will be in touch or on site as soon as possible. End of contact. Evelyn gently put the receiver down. Throughout the call, Miller stood against the wall, his expression changing from mockery to confusion. He couldn't hear what was being said on the other end of the line, but the words, Colonel, personnel number, Pentagon, and senior personnel protection procedures began to sink in. He wasn't a complete idiot. He knew what those words meant. Who did you say you were? Miller stammered, stepping closer to the table, his smug look completely gone, replaced by utter confusion. Evelyn just looked at him silently, her eyes cold and emotionless. Miller swallowed. He turned to look at the door, where the sergeant on duty was also standing there, stunned, pale. He had clearly heard what Evelyn had said. Colonel? You're an Army colonel? Miller asked again, his voice trembling. Evelyn's silence was more frightening than any statement. The duty sergeant rushed to the computer at the counter, tapping away on the keyboard, probably trying to find information on the name Evelyn Reed. In a matter of seconds, the sergeant's expression changed from disbelief to outright horror. He stood up, his office chair clattering across the floor. My God, Miller! She must be Colonel Reed, with the Department of Defense. Miller felt his legs go weak. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He looked at Evelyn as if he were seeing a ghost. The whole act of arrogance, racism, and abuse of power flashed through his mind like a slow-motion movie, and each frame was terrifying. He had arrested, handcuffed, threatened, and insulted an Army colonel who worked at the Pentagon. Sir, Colonel ... Miller stammered, his voice a pathetic sycophant. I'm so sorry. Surely there's been a terrible mistake. I didn't know. He rushed forward to uncuff Evelyn. Stand still, Officer Miller, Evelyn said, her voice taking on the cold, commanding tone of authority for the first time during the confrontation. Don't touch me. Miller paused, his hands and feet flustered. The sergeant on duty rushed into the room, apologizing profusely. Colonel, please forgive our negligence. Do you need anything? A drink? Another phone call? The atmosphere in the small police station suddenly became tense. The other police officers who had been indifferent earlier were now fidgeting, looking towards the second interrogation room with anxiety and fear. They knew something big was about to happen. Less than 20 minutes later, the wait ended with an unmistakable sound. The roar of several heavy vehicles approached, growing louder and louder. Then the screech of brakes as they came to an abrupt stop right in front of the station. Through the small window of the interrogation room, Evelyn could see the red and blue lights of the local police cars now completely overwhelmed by the presence of 5 rugged black SUVs, bearing discreet but powerful military insignia. The doors of the SUVs opened simultaneously. More than a dozen soldiers in full combat fatigues and full equipment stepped out of the vehicles in an orderly and rapid manner. Leading the way was a stern-faced major who walked straight into the police station as if it were deserted. The soldiers followed, spreading out and taking up strategic positions silently but effectively, controlling all entrances and exits. The chief of police of Harmony Creek, a grizzled, pot-bellied man named Thompson, who had just been called to the station in a panic, rushed out to greet him. His face was as white as a sheet. I'm Chief Thompson. Is there anything I can do for you? The Army major did not stop. His cold eyes swept past Thompson and then headed towards the interrogation room. I am Major Evans, of the Military Region Command. We are here to escort Colonel Evelyn Reed. Where is she? Evans's voice was cold and decisive, leaving no room for delay or explanation. Yes, of course. She's right here. Sheriff Thompson stammered, pointing toward room number 2. Major Evans gave the signal, and 2 soldiers immediately went to open the door. Miller and the duty sergeant quickly pressed themselves against the wall. Evans entered, seeing Evelyn still sitting in the chair with her hands still cuffed, probably because the entire police station was too scared to think to unlock her handcuffs. Major Evans immediately stood at attention, raised his hand in salute according to the order. "Colonel Reed, we are here as ordered." Then he turned to Miller and the sergeant, his voice full of authority. "Uncuff the colonel at once." Miller shakily pulled out the key and awkwardly unlocked Evelyn's handcuffs. Once free, Evelyn gently rubbed her red wrists and slowly stood up. She adjusted her clothes, trying to regain her composure. "Thank you, Major Evans and the boys, for arriving so quickly," Evelyn said, her voice calm but still carrying weight. "That is our duty, Colonel," Evans replied. Chief Thompson now dared to approach, trying to smile conciliatorily. "Colonel Reed, Major Evans, I am deeply sorry for this unfortunate incident. This is completely a serious misunderstanding. We will conduct a thorough internal investigation and severely deal with the individuals involved. Officer Miller will be suspended immediately." Major Evans glanced at Thompson, his eyes expressionless. "The Pentagon requires a full report on this incident within 24 hours. We will closely monitor your investigation. Now we will be taking Colonel Reed away." No one dared to stop her. Evelyn Reed, escorted solemnly by Major Evans and the soldiers, walked out of the Harmony Creek police station. She passed Officer Miller, who stood with his head down, trembling with fear. Evelyn said nothing, only glanced at him briefly, a look that was enough to haunt him for the rest of his life. She was ushered into the lead SUV. The door closed behind her, sealing her off from the tense, humiliating atmosphere of the police station. The military convoy rolled silently away, leaving Harmony Creek as quickly as it had arrived, leaving chaos, fear, and a scandal that would surely shake the town's small law enforcement apparatus. Sitting in the comfortable back seat of the military vehicle, Evelyn looked out the window. The town of Harmony Creek passed by and then receded behind her. The afternoon storm seemed to have dissipated, leaving only a gray, damp sky. She felt a sense of relief at being out of danger, but deep inside she felt an indescribable sadness and weariness. She was safe. She was protected. But that was because she was Colonel Evelyn Reed, a high-ranking officer with a powerful support network at the Pentagon. What would happen to another young woman of color, a mother, an ordinary working woman, if they were in the same situation? Who would send a military vehicle to pick them up? Who would hold the abusive police officer accountable? The bitter answer came to her mind. Often no one would. They would suffer the injustice alone, in silence, or worse, become victims of a system that sometimes protected its abusers. Her case, while it ended with a personal justice, she later learned that Officer Miller had been permanently fired and the Harmony Creek Police Department faced a federal investigation, was a poignant illustration of the inequalities that still permeate society. Power and status saved her, but it also exposed the fact that justice is not always a given for everyone. Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her fight was not just in distant headquarters or war-torn lands. It was right here in her hometown, on the streets that seemed the most peaceful. And she knew, no matter how tired she had to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for all those who did not have the same voice and status as she did. The fight for dignity and equality was still a long way ahead. The car continued to roll, taking her away from Harmony Creek, but the image of Officer Miller, of naked injustice, and of her own responsibility would stay with her forever. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.